And with this corn here, I'm not necessarily going for a specific amount of time. I'm really looking at my moisture band here. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having an awesome day. It is Friday, June 28th here in South Georgia, and it's been ridiculously hot this week. We haven't had any rain in about a month, and apparently I've got tater mouth. More on that in a minute. So I figured it was a good time to talk about how much water do we need to be giving all our plants, especially when it's really dry and hot outside. But before we talk about watering, let's address this tater mouth situation real quick. I thought this was a pretty funny story considering the fact that we get people commenting from time to time, you know, criticizing the way we say tater as opposed to potato. So one night earlier this week, I didn't sleep well at all, and I woke up, my throat was so sore and swollen I couldn't even talk. Now historically, I'm too stubborn to call the doctor and make an appointment. I think I'll just fight through it for a few days. But my wonderful wife, because she doesn't want to hear me moan and groan for the next few days, makes an appointment for me, texts me and says, go see the doctor at 3 o'clock today. So I go to the local clinic, the doc's checking me out there. She's got a student in there that's kind of shadowing her, and she says, you see his throat right there? He's got tater mouth. Now, just to be clear here, tater mouth was not the official diagnosis written down on the chart or put in the computer from my visit that day, but I knew exactly what she meant. When I talked, it sounded like I had a big tater stuck in the back of my throat there, and felt like I had a tater stuck in the back of my throat. But anyways, they gave me a shot in my right cheek, not this right cheek, and sent me on my way. Doing a little bit better now, but my voice still sounds a little bit funny, still feels a little bit funny when I talk. So I didn't get a new microphone, just working through this tater mouth situation. But anyways, let's talk about what we came here to talk about, which is how much water do we need to be giving all these different plants we got growing out here, especially when it's really hot and dry outside. Now, anytime we're talking about a broad subject like this, I always like to go on the old internet and see what the Google has to say about it. So I typed in, how much water do certain vegetable plants need? And most of the results that came up were saying that, you know, on average, about an inch per week. But the AI generated result from Google also added that for every degree that your average temperature is above 60 degrees, you need to add another half an inch. And I got to thinking, well, our average temperature has been around 80 degrees here lately. That would mean 10 more inches. So 10 plus 1, 11 inches of water a week. That seems like a little much. So I thought we'd break it down, talk about some different factors that can come into play as far as how much water you need to be giving your plants. And then I'm going to tell you exactly how much water I've been giving each one of my plots lately. So the whole how much water question, which we get a lot, is a loaded question because there's so many factors that come into play there, and we'll go through a few of these factors. So number one, it's going to depend on what vegetable you're growing. Corn is going to need a lot more water than something like sweet taters will. So you've got crops that demand a lot of water. You got crops that are pretty drought tolerant like sweet taters and okra that don't necessarily need a whole lot of water and can still kind of hang on pretty well even when it's really dry outside. Another thing to obviously consider is climate. Our plants down here are going to need a lot more water this time of year than say somebody growing a garden up in the New England area. Another thing to consider is soil type. So in our part of Georgia, we have really sandy soils that drain very well, and it's almost impossible for me to overwater via irrigation. Now, we can get too much water if we get a ton of rain at one time or rain on consecutive days, but it doesn't happen that often. And then lastly, how you're watering is going to have a lot to do with it as well. So if you're only using overhead irrigation, you're going to have to use a lot more water to keep your plants happy compared to somebody using drip irrigation, providing water right there at the base of the plants. So there's not a one-size-fits-all answer to the how much water question, but I'll give you an idea of how much water we've been giving our plants over the last month with daytime temps in the high 90s and no rain. And with the exception of taters and sweet taters, which we usually overhead water, I use subsurface drip tape on almost everything we grow around here. Now, the drip tape I like to use is this P1 Irritech tape that we get from Drip Depot. I'll put a link in the description below. There's lots of different options as far as thickness, emitter spacing, water output. I use this 15 mil thickness tape with a 6-inch emitter spacing. I think it has a 0.45 gallon per hour output per 100 foot of tape, so approximately a half a gallon per hour per 100 foot of tape. Now, I like the 6-inch emitter spacing, even though we have stuff not planted as close to 6 inches, just because it puts out more water. I don't have to run the drip as long to keep plants happy. So let's start out by looking at this blue field corn that we planted a few weeks ago and is in serious need of some weeding. So I ran the drip irrigation on this corn last night for a few hours, and with this corn here, I'm not necessarily going for a specific amount of time. I'm really looking at my moisture band here. As you can see, we've got a nice moisture band that is covering that entire double row there. I really don't want to water more than that. I don't really want to put water out here between these rows. If I left it running for a long time, it would eventually soak this entire spot here. But I just want to get a nice moisture band that covers all those plants there. And usually, I don't know, say 2 to 3 hours will take care of that, even when it's really dry outside. Now let's compare that with what we're doing on these watermelons here, and we've got some of these that are getting real close. So we'll be doing a taste testing on a video soon. Stay tuned for that. Now, unlike corn, which is pretty tough to overwater, you have to be a little more careful with watermelons, especially when you've got fruits maturing on the plants. If you water these things too much right now at this stage, you can get some of the fruits starting to split on you. If we were to get a hurricane right now dumping tons of rain on us, that wouldn't be good for our watermelons. We might have some split and go bad on us. So have to be a little bit more careful, but I know what I can get away with. So I actually let the drip run all night last night on these watermelons. Came out here before I went to bed, moved the water hose from that corn plot I just showed you over here to these watermelons. And with these watermelons, it's kind of the same concept as the corn. I'm not necessarily going for a specific amount of time. I'm more looking at my moisture band there. And with these, since we've got so many vines out here, I'm waiting till I get about an 18 to 24 inch wide moisture band there before I turn the water off. Now, I probably didn't need to let it run overnight, but I wasn't going to come out here at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to turn it off. It wasn't going to hurt to let it run a little longer. Now moving over here to this plot where we have the water running currently, you can see that moisture band starting to develop on those young squash plants. This plot is a little different because we've got several different things growing here. We've got cucumber, squash, and tomatoes, and also this is one of our no-till plots that has had a ton of compost added, so it drains even better than our native soil. Also means we have to give this plot a little more water than we do some of our other plots. So in this plot, we've got some young squash plants. We've also got some absolutely massive squash plants that are kind of on their way out. Got some massive cucumber vines that are fruiting like crazy. Got some massive indeterminate heirloom plants that tend to be pretty thirsty. So I've been running the water on this plot for about 6 or 7 hours at a time, just really soaking it in. If I don't, I can tell those plants will be struggling a little bit. Leaves will kind of go limp on me, and the plants aren't happy. So I've kind of had to adjust as it gets drier and drier around here and give this plot more water than some of the other in-ground plots, just because the plants are telling me they need it. And then lastly, let's talk about our raised bed plot here, which we typically have to water more than anything because the soil in these beds drains so well. Now, most of these plants look relatively happy now, but I can see these okra plants right here that are starting to grow pretty fast. Need to thin these out. We can see the leaves looking a little limp on those. Those look pretty thirsty. So this time of year, especially when it's as dry as it has been, these raised beds are getting watered every other night, all night long. So I'll come out here before I go to bed, plug up the water on this raised bed plot, and let it run. Sometimes I don't turn it off till 9 or 10 o'clock the next morning. Never have standing water out here, and that's what it takes to keep all the plants in this plot happy. Now, as far as watering frequency goes, none of these plots are getting watered every single day, but they are getting watered religiously every other day. That moisture band or soil saturation that the drip irrigation provides seems to keep them happy for one day, but the following day that soil is powder dry again and we have to water again. And I've had to adjust things a little bit over the last month as we went from just dry conditions a couple weeks ago to now what they're calling drought conditions currently. So a few weeks ago, what I would do is come out here in the morning, turn the water on my corn, let the drip run for a few hours, move it to the watermelons for a few hours. After lunch, move it to the tomatoes, squash, cucumber plot. Usually let that run into the night a little bit, then switch it over to the raised bed plot, let that run overnight. But recently, as it's gotten hotter and drier, have to run the drip on the corn a little longer, have to run the drip on the watermelons a little longer, and then I've been running the drip on the tomato, cucumber, squash plot overnight, and then the following day is when I'll focus on the raised bed plot. So I've kind of got it staggered out so I can keep everything happy. Every plot still getting watered every other day. So you just got to be flexible with this, especially when it's hot and dry. Got to be able to adjust your schedule based on what the weather is giving you, and your plants will tell you what they need. They'll tell you if they're not getting enough water. You'll see those squash and cucumber leaves starting to kind of fold over a little bit, even those ochre leaves like I showed you in the raised beds earlier. Your plants will also tell you when they got too much water. Those leaves will start yellowing, and that's a good sign you may be overdoing it a little bit on the water. So hopefully that information was helpful, just kind of give you an idea of what we're doing around here. Now I realize our situation is not the same as everyone else's. We have a well, so we don't have to pay a water bill, and the drip irrigation also helps us conserve a lot of water. We don't use near as much as if we were overhead water and everything. And if you've not made the move to drip irrigation, I tell you, years like this will make you think hard about it. So I'll put links below to all three of our irrigation blogs: fruit trees, in-ground garden plots, and our raised beds. You can check those out. We've got links to all the pieces we use. Also, watch this video right here we did a while back showing how to install drip irrigation for an in-ground garden plot. We'll walk you through the process step by step. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.